Hello, everyone, and welcome into another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Wednesday, October 16th, and we have a great show for you today. We got to start getting into Week 8 because we got a ton of games to get to over the next couple of days. But we'll start with Alabama-Tennessee, one of the more confusing games of the weekend, because 2 weeks ago I would have said it's two title contenders. Now I'm very confused about where they stand in college football, but I'll break that game down in the first one. Then we'll get into the SEC breakdowns. A couple of big-time games, LSU at Arkansas, Auburn heading up to Missouri. A couple of games that are a little bit more under the radar, but could have a ton to do with what the SEC looks like down the road. Then we'll move over to the Big 12. We'll get to Colorado at Arizona, a huge one for Colorado to get back on track. And then we'll get to Kansas State, West Virginia, one where Kansas State badly needs to win to keep in that Big 12 race. We'll get into the top 10 teams. What do we need to see from them this upcoming weekend, whether it's nitty-gritty or just kind of general sense? What do we need to see from them in some big-time matchups in the top 10 this upcoming weekend? And then we'll just get some questions out of the way. We'll get some Wednesday questions, all of the things that we just kind of wondering going into the week. One of the biggest ones for me is, are we leaving this week with some answers or more questions about college football? Because it could go any which way. But before we jump in here, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have fun back and forth here, is to use that super chat feature. At the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page, there's a little $sign. Click on that, add any question, comment you like. It'll pop up on the screen and we can have a fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be interactive. We're in the meat of the season, so I want you guys to be able to ask any question you like and we can incorporate it into the show. But let's go ahead and jump in here because this one's going to be fun. No two ways about that. Whenever you get the third Saturday in October, you have some fun. And we saw it 2 years ago in Tennessee when it was one of the best games Tennessee's played in quite some time. It was a huge, huge game for that program. Showed you that they were kind of finding their way back up to the top. Obviously, last year was a little bit of a lull, but feels like they're right back there. Have a great defense, an incredible team, one of the best running backs in the entire country in Dylan Sampson, and a quarterback in Nico Iamaleava, that very talented player is not quite hitting the mark as of late. So definitely something to watch as we head into this game. But the reality is, 2 weeks ago, if this game was to happen, you're saying these are two title contenders. They're feeling great about where they are. Alabama coming off a win over Georgia, Tennessee off a win over Oklahoma. You're thinking, okay, this is going to be a huge game. Whoever wins this one has every chance to win a title. Now you go in trying to wonder who these teams are in general. I'm very, very confused about where they stand in the college football world, but Alabama was able to eke out a win against South Carolina last week. Kane Womack did a much better job in that game, just kind of holding everything in, although there were some big plays downfield that I don't know if they were Kane Womack's fault because I don't know the play call. I'm not necessarily someone to go after play calling too aggressively here, but Tennessee is in a spot where they have issues that are both simple and complicated, because the reality is the offense is just disjointed. Now, there's been some narrow misses on execution that are costing them big-time plays downfield. Nico is missing those passes from time to time. Some receivers are not giving him the help that he probably needs on those deep balls from time to time. So there are a couple of different things here, and it's one of those things that you can probably pinpoint the issue pretty quickly with Tennessee. How quickly you can fix it is going to be a different question. And then last week, we talked about the LSU-Ole Miss game. It's kind of a pseudo-elimination game in this 12-team playoff. If you're in the SEC and you have two losses before like Week 8, Week 9, Week 10 even, you're probably in pretty bad shape going forward if you want to be in the CFP. Both these teams, or whoever loses this game, would have that after this game, and they have a lot of games coming forward that I don't think they're going to be able to go unscathed the rest of the way. So whoever wins this one is in very good shape. Whoever loses this one, I would venture to say, is probably out of the CFP race. So a huge one in Knoxville on Saturday, and that fan base is going to be on absolute fire. I can promise you that. But the biggest question for me is, was Milroe's performance last week a blip, or is it the inconsistencies that we saw last year? Are they here to stay? Is that just a part of his game and he was just playing really good football the first couple of weeks? Definitely something you're going to want to figure out, and he's going to have to play really, really good football in this game, especially with his legs, which we'll get to here in a minute. But one of the big-time matchups to watch, and there's plenty all across the field to be totally honest with you, but the one that I think might decide it is the Tennessee O-line against the Bama D-line. The Tennessee O-line did not play well against Florida. They missed a lot of they weren't great at pulling on runs. They didn't necessarily do a great job. Lance Hurd kind of got eaten for dinner in that game. You got to be able to block better against a group that is plenty athletic coming off the edge. So we'll talk about them here in a second. But in 2022, we walked into this game, number 5 Alabama, number 6 Tennessee. The line was at Bama minus 8.5. And the reality of that was just, it's Alabama, it's Tennessee. They always beat Tennessee. That's not a question. They had beaten them 16 years before that. Well, this one's a little bit different. It's Alabama still favored on the road at Tennessee, but it's much closer. This is a game that, frankly, I would call a coin flip, if I'm being totally honest with you. So it's going to be incredible, going to be a little bit of a dogfight, but let's get to some players to watch in this one, because I think Alabama's going to need Jeremy Bernard in this game. I think everyone knows what Ryan Williams is, and last week was a little bit of a step back in production for Ryan Williams, and Jeremy Bernard picked up the slack in a lot of different ways. He's going to need to do that again this week, because I know that Tennessee has some holes in that back end. I think the way you open them up is with someone like Jeremy Bernard, running those drags, running those deep crosses that pull some people inside, and then you can hit the deep shots to Ryan Williams and all the other receivers out there. I believe they're going to be missing Kendrick Law in this game. I could be off on that. I think Kobe Prentice is up in the air, so plenty of people that need to step up. Emmanuel Henderson, another one to watch outside for Alabama in this one. Keon Saab on the back end of that defense is massive, because you know what Tennessee likes to do. You know they like to throw in the middle of the field. That's where their money is made. And although Nico has missed a couple of those balls, Keon Saab is incredible. He has a great nose for the ball, has great ball skills when it's in the air. And if he can make a couple of plays in this game and get that Alabama defense off the field, because I believe right now they're facing the most plays of anyone in the entire country on the defensive side of the ball, you got to get off the field one way or another, whether it's picks, whether it's stopping them on third down, which is going to be huge in this game. So definitely a lot to watch there. And then for Tennessee, you need Deshaun Bishop in this game. Dylan Sampson, in my opinion, is one of the very best, probably top 5 running back in the country right about now, doing incredible things behind not elite blocking by any means. So Deshaun Bishop's got to be a guy that gets a couple of carries. He doesn't need to take over this game. He doesn't need to be the big player in any way. What he does need to do is give Dylan Sampson just a little bit of a breather here and there, let him open up a couple of holes, and then Dylan Sampson can make those big plays that he's more than capable of making. And then on the back end of that Tennessee defense, Jamar McCoy is a fantastic corner for Tennessee, and he's probably going to have his hands full with Ryan Williams. I don't know if he's going to be traveling with him. It totally depends on the scheme. Usually they don't. Usually it's more about who plays boundary corner, who plays field corner, and that's about it, unless you have an absolute freak. I bet Travis Hunter gets a little bit of that treatment over there at Colorado. But at the end of the day, I do think this is a player that he's going to get Ryan Williams a lot. He's going to get Jeremy Bernard a lot. He's going to have to play really well in the run game when they get on the outside with Jalen Milroe. There's a lot that he's going to have to be able to execute on Saturday. And if he gets taken advantage of a couple of times downfield, that could be the total difference in this game. So they got to be able to tighten up on that back end. And a couple other keys for Tennessee to be able to win this game: you have to get the ball out on the edge quickly, because the thing about Tennessee the last couple of weeks has been Nico's just been thinking too much, and a lot of things play into that. The offensive line's not quite playing well enough. They're moving him off a spot, but then when he has a clean pocket, he's moving out of that as well, because he feels like it's going to collapse at some point, because it has early on in that game. So the reality is you have to make him feel comfortable. The best way to do that is just kind of take the choice out of his hands, whether it's RPOs that he's comfortable with, screens, quick reads, anything that you can do to get the ball out of his hands, get it in the playmaker's hands, and then maybe you can make some plays. And then you open up the deep shots. You pull a couple of safeties in, and then hopefully you can hit some of those deep shots over the top that you've struggled to thus far. But you have to get this kid into a rhythm. Whatever makes most sense for him is absolutely the way you should go about business. And Florida was just not scared of them. They were not scared of that deep ball, and they didn't have a reason to be scared, because Tennessee missed a ton of them in that game. So tons of stacked boxes, a lot of man coverage. If they can do that, if Alabama can execute that, which has been a big-time question for them, then it's going to be a really long day for Tennessee, I can promise you that. And then you got to let Dylan Sampson lead the way. This is not going to be even a question in my mind. This is what will be happening on Saturday, because if you put a lot on Nico's shoulders in this game, I feel pretty confident that he's not going to be able to execute to the degree that he needs to. I think he's a very talented kid. I just think when you're walking into this particular game, there's going to be a lot going through his head. You're going to have to get that run game going. Now, the problem with that is Sampson had 112 yards last week against Florida. Absolutely incredible. 95 of them were after contact. That cannot be the case this upcoming weekend. You have to be able to give him some room, and you have to be able to get him running downhill, because if you can do that, he could probably get over 200 yards and totally take over this game. But if you keep having him hit behind the line of scrimmage, 1 yard past the line of scrimmage, it could be a long day and you're not quite getting the results that you wanted to. And then finally, give Nico some 6 and 7 man protections. He's going to need time, and he's going to need ability to sit there and say, I am in a clean pocket. I don't need to leave. I don't need to bail a little bit earlier because a lot of it feels uncomfortable. Give him clean pockets early on in the game, and then I think you can go back to normal blocking schemes. You can go back to 6, even 5-man protections, and he'll stand in a little bit better. I just think those early downs, you have to make sure that he's given clean pockets, have to make sure that he feels comfortable where he is, because then I think later in the game, he won't bail from those great situations, be able to make that big-time throw that could totally change this game. So a lot on the table for Tennessee and a lot of things that they have to fix up, but a couple of things that can be fixed up if you can just execute those really minor things that they've been missing the last couple of weeks. As for Alabama, you got to get Jalen Milroe running the ball, and for a number of different reasons. Probably the biggest one is your running backs haven't been doing a whole lot. You have not been able to get a running game going really much at all with the running backs. I think they're very talented running backs, but if your offensive line can't run block all that well, it's not going to be a great day. So you got to get Jalen Milroe out on the edge. Now, last week he only had 36 yards on 18 carries. The year before when he played Tennessee was not a day where he got out and ran too often. He had, I believe, a 15-yard run, but that was about it in that game. So you got to be very careful with this kid, but if Jalen Milroe is not a factor with his legs in this game and he has to stand in the pocket and make all those throws, it's going to be tough, and he's going to find himself on his backside quite a few times in this game. And then commit to stop the run. I know that sounds a little bit crazy when you're playing Tennessee because they have so much explosive potential, but as of right now, they're just not hitting deep balls, and I would dare them to hit one. I would say, we're going to stop the run. We're going to do everything we can to bottle in Dylan Sampson, and then if you can hit him, more than welcome. You can absolutely hit him, but there have been holes in this Alabama back end. It doesn't necessarily matter if you can't hit that guy going downfield, and Nico just hasn't been able to the last couple of weeks. Now, here's the thing about Tennessee offense. It can flip in a second. They can get things going. They can score 40 points in this game and make me look really dumb. But at the end of the day, I think committing to the run, making sure that Dylan Sampson doesn't beat you, and then you'll live with what Nico Iamaleava does. If he makes those big-time plays, if he rises to the moment, then so be it. But I tend to believe he's going to miss a lot more than he's going to hit. And the other part of this is unleash the pass rush. This offensive line for Tennessee is very attackable. You can go after them pretty much every single time you're on the field. Florida got 8 pressures, 3 sacks, and caused plenty of issues in that game just by virtue of getting home early. Nico got a little bit nervous late. So Qua Rousseau, Quay Robinson, going to be incredible players, huge players in this game. 2 guys that, frankly, if you're going to get Nico all over the place, if you're going to get his confidence as low as it feels like it is right now, you're going to have to get after him early. Then he's going to start making those mistakes because that's just been the formula the last couple of weeks. So it's going to be a battle. These are 2 really, really interesting teams that badly need this win, maybe more than just about anyone this upcoming weekend, but I'm going to take Alabama, and I'm going to take him for a very, very simple purpose. I trust Jalen Milroe to make the plays down the stretch in this atmosphere more than I do Nico. And that's not an indictment on Nico. I frankly think once we get over to 2025, he's going to be one of the very best players in the entire country. As of right now, I just don't think he's there to play in this game. With all of the things on the table, I just think he's going to make a couple of mistakes. And I'm feeling very, very wary about this pick, but I am going to lean Alabama in this one. Going to be a really tough fight, and whoever comes out of it, feeling pretty good about where they sit in the SEC. Whoever loses is asking a lot of questions on Monday. So going to be an incredible matchup, one that if you make any pick confidently, I call you a little bit crazy, but at the end of the day, going to be an incredible matchup in Knoxville, and it's going to be one that's going to define those seasons and programs in a ton of different ways going forward. But let's take our first break here, and when we come back, we got a couple other SEC games to get to. LSU heads up to Arkansas for a possible upset alert, and then Auburn at Missouri is going to be a huge, huge game that could trip up Missouri going forward. But we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just got to the third Saturday in October. A credible game between Alabama and Tennessee up there in Knoxville this upcoming weekend, but we got a couple other SEC matchups, and we will get to the big one tomorrow, I promise you that. But let's get to LSU-Arkansas to start this thing off, because this is a game that, frankly, doesn't jump off the page, right? Two teams that are playing good football right about now. I believe Arkansas 4-2, LSU 5-1, coming off a huge win over Ole Miss. Going to Arkansas after this type of win is dangerous. We saw it with Tennessee. It was not necessarily a situation that they were fully ready to walk into, and Arkansas took full advantage. And frankly, I just think this is a much better Arkansas team than we're giving them credit for right now. So it's going to be interesting. We'll learn a lot about LSU's mental toughness, about their leadership in a lot of ways, and it's going to be really fun to watch. And the thing is, it does sound like Taylor Green is going to be good to go in this game. Getting that bye week was absolutely huge for them. Suffered a bone bruise in that game against Tennessee, so will be interesting to see how 100% he is. Maybe he's not quite the running threat that they might need him to be in this game. So definitely something to watch. And if he can't get going the way, if he's 80%, 70%, then Arkansas's got a little bit of an issue here. But the Arkansas O-line has done an incredible job, or at least a couple of weeks ago they did an incredible job against that Tennessee front. The LSU pass rush is a little bit different. They throw a ton of bodies at you. They come from a lot of different perspectives. It's not necessarily just edge rushers and linebackers. They'll bring a corner. They'll bring Major Burns on a corner blitz, and they'll make problems for you there. So the offensive tackles, Fernando Carmona, Keyshawn Blackstock, have to be just incredible in this game. I know Blackstock played a little bit worse of a game against Tennessee, so maybe that's the one that they attack a little bit more aggressively if you're LSU. And LSU's got two games coming forward, at A&M and then at home against Alabama. You don't want to walk into those with with two losses on your schedule. You probably can't walk into those with two losses on your schedule if you want to possibly make it to the CFP. And then if somehow you get out of those games with only one loss, a lot of things can happen, but we'll get to that when we get there. But incredible game, one of those that is very sneaky. Arkansas could possibly get to 5-2, become somewhat of a player in the SEC, or LSU could possibly throw their hat into the ring for the SEC title. So going to be really interesting to watch this one unfold. Couple of players to watch here is Andrew Armstrong is going to be an interesting player in this game. He's one of those wide receivers that if you haven't watched Arkansas, if you haven't gotten a chance to click over to the Razorbacks, he is well worth your time. Number 2 is absolutely special. He is one of the more athletic guys on the football field whenever he steps on it. He makes at least one play a game, which doesn't make any sense. I'll be totally honest with you. So a very, very fun player. One of those guys that against an LSU back end that is exploitable, I expect him to get the ball a ton in this game. And then we got to Nico Slaughter. He's got to make plays pretty much left and right in this one, whether it's run fits with Caden Durham possibly getting out of the backfield, whether it's, guarding a lot of these receivers on this back end, whether it's kind of blitzing from time to time. He's a super important player and very, very versatile for this defense. So whatever he does on this on Saturday could very well dictate how well this Arkansas defense is going to be playing on Saturday. As for LSU, Aaron Anderson has been absolutely incredible this year, and Kyron Lacey kind of stole the show last week, but this was their leading receiver going into that game. I'm not certain that he is coming out. He very well could be, but a very talented player coming out of that slot position for LSU, and when you look at Arkansas, there's a lot to like about that defense. They do such a good job of disguising stuff. I'm blanking on the DC's name right now, but he's done an incredible job. A very, very good defensive coordinator, and LSU will have their hands full. I think they need a guy that can just get yards after the catch. I think they need that guy to run drag, run a screen pass that gets him out on the edge and gets him 30 yards and really opens this game up. So when you need that kind of security blanket, if you will, I think Aaron Anderson could be that type of guy, along with Mason Taylor, obviously. And then we got to talk about Whit Weeks. This guy's been absolutely incredible, especially since Harold Perkins has gone out with injury. He's been playing at an all-SEC, all-American level at linebacker. Been absolutely all over the place, and one of those guys that if you're going to stop Jaquindon Jackson, he's going to have a huge game in this one. And then keys to the game. Who can start fast is probably the most important thing to me, because Arkansas coming off a bye after beating Tennessee, LSU coming off an overtime thriller that they very much needed. That is the recipe for a slow start. No two ways about that. So who can kind of curb that, who can handle that and get out to an early lead, probably is in pretty good shape going forward in this game. So whoever can throw that first punch, you feel pretty good about where you're going the rest of the way. And then LSU's edge rushers, and this is not necessarily just about the pass rush. Now, they can get home. LSU had 27 pressures, 7 sacks against Ole Miss. They were all over the place. I think getting to Taylon Green is going to be a little bit tougher with how good he is at evading pressure, but at the end of the day, you also need to account for his legs in a lot of different ways. On those read options, on a lot of those different things, those edge rushers need to be very disciplined. You need to either get upfield and be able to take away that mesh point, or you need to stay a little bit more downfield and make sure he can't exploit you on a scramble where you open a gap. So a lot of things that LSU is going to have to do, and those edge rushers are going to be asked to do, not just be full go going at the quarterback, but play a little bit more nuanced on Saturday for sure. And then physicality up front. Arkansas is going to try to run the ball. LSU has been much better on the defensive line at being able to at least hold serve against a lot of these elite offensive linemen. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do. It's one of those things that you don't feel great about LSU stopping it absolutely cold, but maybe they can do just enough. Stop him to 80 yards, to 90 yards, and make it not this massive game for Jaquindon Jackson where he totally takes over. And then on the other side, can LSU find the run game? Can they be the team that is able to enforce their will a little bit? The run blocking has not been good at all this year, so going to have to find it one way, or a one-dimensional offense is a lot easier to defend, I can promise you that. So going to be interesting to watch this one unfold. I think it's one that LSU badly needs. It's one that Arkansas, if they win it, a lot of things get interesting in the SEC, but I do think LSU ekes this one out. I don't think it's a very pretty game for LSU. I don't think it's perfect by any means, but at the end of the day, I do think they get it done. I think Caden Durham is actually going to have a big-time game in this one, whether it's receiving or rushing. I think he's going to have plenty of space to be able to run, and we'll see what happens. It's one of those games that seems a little bit more under the radar, and one that I'm sure you weren't necessarily circling at the beginning of the season, but both these teams playing really, really good football right now, and cannot wait to see them face off on Saturday. Moving forward, this is a little bit more off the radar, but the reality is Missouri could save their season right here. They could get back on the right track. They could be that one-loss team heading into an Alabama game, and frankly, you can lose that one, and you can still roll on and possibly get into the playoffs. So a lot of things on the table for this team. They're coming off that UMass win after just getting absolutely steamrolled by A&M. Hopefully they'll be able to refocus, because everything is still on the table for Missouri. Just got to be able to win at least this game and then move forward and probably win a couple that are going to be tough as well. But Auburn's kind of in a weird spot the last couple of weeks. Lost a really gross one to Arkansas, was on track to beat Oklahoma, then the pick six happened, fought against Georgia, but it just was never really enough to be able to win that game. So you got to flush all that. You got to just play really, really good football on one Saturday, and frankly, I think it would flush away a lot of the worries from this early part of the season. You get a ranked win on the road against a team that, frankly, very few people are going to pick you against. You have to feel very confident about where you are going forward, or at least the future of this program going forward. And then the biggest thing is, was A&M game an anomaly for for Missouri, or was it just who they are? Or is this back end as weak as it looked against A&M, or is it a little bit just A&M was executing at a ridiculously high level? I think it might be a little bit of both, and we'll see how badly Auburn can kind of take advantage of that. Some players to watch. Cam Coleman just has to be a bigger part of this offense. I think Keandre Lambert-Smith is obviously leading the way. Love what Malcolm Simmons is doing. Perry Thompson is someone that I'd love to get involved more, but when you talk about that deep threat that's going to cause all types of problems for corners for Missouri, and frankly, play kind of that Noah Thomas type role that A&M had in that game a couple of weeks ago. I think Cam Coleman can do that, no doubt about it. So a very talented player and could give them the couple of shots that they possibly need in this game. And then we got Keldrick Falk, a very talented defensive lineman for Auburn, and one of those guys that Missouri is a good offense right now. If you take away that run game, they are not that great of an offense right now. If you can possibly stonewall Marcus Carroll as well as Nate Noel at the line of scrimmage, it's going to be a long day because Brady Cook has not necessarily proven he can make the big-time plays he needs to down the stretch of games. And then let's talk about Marcus Carroll, a very talented running back, transferred over from Georgia State this past offseason and played a really good game last weekend against UMass. He's one of those guys that I really think is very, very capable of any breakout at any time this season. Now, having Nate Noel obviously helps him split some of those carries, but when you have those two guys, I think you have plenty at your disposal. Can they find the openings in the run game is going to be huge, and Marcus Carroll, kind of the bigger back, might be a little bit easier to figure that out with. And then we got Drayden Norwood. This back end of Missouri just got downright embarrassed against A&M, and frankly, Auburn can do the exact same thing. Although they're not this incredible world-beating team, not nearly the team that A&M is, they can hit deep balls. That's what they do. That's what they like to do. And frankly, if Drayden Norwood doesn't play a lot better football than he did against A&M, that's exactly what they're going to do. So he needs to play really, really good football, not just over the top playing really good coverage, but coming down in the box, getting Jarquez Hunter on the ground. A lot of things are going to fall on the shoulder of Drayden Norwood in this game. Some keys to the game. I think explosive plays are going to decide this one, plain and simple. I think when you look at both these teams, remarkable wide receiver cores, two quarterbacks that, although aren't, jump off the page talented, can execute the ball and can get it into the hands of these receivers, and then incredible things happen. There's so many different playmakers all across the field. I think when it comes down to it, you could very easily be looking at the stat and says, who had the more 20-plus yard plays? That's probably your winner, if I had to imagine. And then the other sort, limiting quarterback mistakes. Both these quarterbacks have been struggling in kind of different ways. Brady Cook hasn't necessarily been turning over the ball aggressively. What he has been doing is missing receivers in big-time moments. He's been missing big plays that could have been touchdowns. He's been missing, that big third-down conversion, overthrowing guys. It's just little things that he needs to get kind of figured out. It's been a problem for quite some time, so hopefully he can figure it out relatively quickly. But as of right now, that is the biggest thing for him. Just stay clean. And then Peyton Thorne, I don't have to tell anyone that he has to limit the mistakes at quarterback because the reality is he didn't have any turnovers against Georgia, played a pretty good game, really executed at a pretty high level, and although they came out on the wrong side of it, had a number of plays that made it look like, okay, that's the Peyton Thorne that we have become a little bit more accustomed to seeing. And then you got to win at the line of scrimmage. No two ways about that. All these playmakers on the outside, it's going to be so much dedicated towards the pass game and making sure you don't get that big play on you. Run lanes will open. So who can win that line of scrimmage, who can kind of condense those run lanes a little bit better is probably going to be a huge, huge piece in this game. Jarquez Hunter on one side, absolutely incredible. You got Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll on the other. All of those guys can make you pay on the ground game. So whoever can squeeze those holes, whoever can keep everything kind of pinned in just a little bit, doesn't have to be perfect by any means, but put them in a position where they have to be one-dimensional, and then it just comes down to who offense can execute in the pass game, which will be very interesting to watch because neither are executing all that great in the pass game. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with the upset here. I don't love what Missouri's having right now. I don't fully understand what all of the issues are, I'll be honest, but at the end of the day, that back end seems to be very attackable. Auburn has the players to attack it. I don't know if they can get home on the defensive line the way that they need to, and then if Peyton Thorne has time, he's not a great player, but you give him plenty of time back there, he is going to make you pay. So I think Auburn gets this one done. I think Missouri's season comes a little bit to an end, kind of the same way Tennessee's would or Alabama's would at the end of the week. Just you're going to have a huge uphill battle the rest of the way, and I just think Auburn's one of the big-time upsets of the weekend. So it's going to be an interesting game, one of those that you could go pretty much any which way. Missouri blowout, Missouri close win, Auburn blowout, Auburn close win, and you could talk me into it. But as of right now, I am going to go Auburn getting that close win. One of the few upsets of this upcoming weekend, at least in my eyes, just in terms of you got a couple of toss-up games that I'm just not counting upsets, if I'm being totally honest with you. But let's take our second break here. And when we come back, we got to get to the Big 12. We got a couple of big-time matchups. Colorado heading over to Arizona, as well as Kansas State playing West Virginia. Huge games that will have a ton to do with what the Big 12 is going forward. So we'll break it down right after this.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about those couple of SEC games that are going to be very important this upcoming weekend. LSU at Arkansas, Missouri at Auburn at Missouri. Two really interesting games, and I do have Auburn getting that upset up there in Columbia, Missouri. Going to be an incredible game there. But let's get into the Big 12. Some definite ones that I want to break down. Also, what's going on, Eric? How are you? But it's going to be an incredible couple of matchups, and ones that are really going to define the Big 12 going forward and could give us a couple of answers, could cause a little bit more chaos, and we'll get into that throughout this. But the biggest one for Colorado, Arizona, the biggest news, no doubt about it, Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn Jr. will be on the field. That is huge for that team. Omarion Miller will not be on the field. Sounds like he is going to miss extended time. Hate that for him. He played really good football when his number was called last week and really did a ton for that team. But at the end of the day, you get your two big-time receivers back and definitely need them. How close to 100% they'll be is a huge-time question, but we'll see what happens there. They're going to throw the ball in this game. I don't think I need to tell you guys that, but Arizona throws the ball right around 60% of the time. Colorado is at 63%. They are very well towards the top of the country in those two respects, and there's going to be plenty of possessions and likely plenty of points in this one. In fact, I'm surprised the over-under is only at 57.5. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a really fun game, one back and forth, and the quarterback matchup is going to be fun. Now, Noah Fifita has not played his best football by really any means this year, but the reality is he's always got that 400-yard, 4-touchdown game in his back pocket. He always has that ability. He always has that explosive ability. So got to make sure you keep him under wraps. And Shedeur Sanders is playing the best quarterback of really anyone in the country. There are a couple other guys that we could have a conversation about, but watching this guy week over week, there is no one that executes under worse circumstances more consistently than he does. So incredible player, incredible matchup that we're going to get, and I think we're going to get some points for sure. And then the biggest thing here is Colorado's become must-watch. I don't care who they're playing, whether it's North Dakota State to start the season, whether it's Utah, whether it's Kansas State, Arizona. They play really fun games, and frankly, I do not expect this to be any different. I think it's going to be really fun, and the big thing here for Colorado is this is right around the time last year that it all fell apart. You took a big-time loss to Oregon, and everything just kind of fell off the wayside. This would be the game to prove everyone that you're a little bit different, that you have every ability to bounce back from these big-time moments, bounce back from a loss that could hypothetically knock you out of the Big 12 title. It won't if you're able to run the table, but this is going to be a tough game to get things started. So going to be awesome to watch this one. LaJohntay Wester is someone that has to be huge for Colorado in this game because those two guys are coming back. You will have Travis Hunter. You will have Jimmy Horn Jr. How many times are they going to be able to be on the field with their health? That'll be a big-time question. Don't know the details around that. Maybe they're 100%. Maybe they're more than fine. But as of right now, I am pointing towards LaJohntay Wester, Will Shepard, Jerlon Miller, whoever else out there that can make those plays and just take that little bit of pressure off those two players. And then I got DJ McKinney on the back end of that Colorado defense. When you look at that back end, it's a lot of Travis Hunter and everyone else. But if you were to find another player that can play really, really good coverage, it would be this guy. He does really, really good job all over the field. And frankly, while Travis Hunter is going to get plenty of T-Mac on Saturday, no two ways about that, this is probably going to be the other guy that's going to have to get him a couple of times, going to have to be up to the challenge, and we'll see what he is. I know Deion Sanders thinks that he has the potential to be a first-round pick. Very talented kid that absolutely could get there. This could be a game where he proves a lot to a lot of NFL scouts. And then we got Quali Conley. This is something that Arizona has really struggled to do, and both these teams have really struggled to do. But at the end of the day, Quali Conley is a very talented player, both running the ball and catching the ball out of the backfield. I think he's one of those guys that when you need the couple of plays, I do think he's going to be able to make them at the end of the day. And then we have one more player here. Dalton Johnson is an incredible safety that's a little bit more of a run-heavy safety, drops down into the box a ton, plays a lot of run help in. He's going to be capable of doing that in this game, and frankly, if he can stonewall this Colorado front, and not even that, but if he can make the tackles when they absolutely need them, not turn those 5-yard drags into 40-yard plays or that hitch into a 20-yard play when they make someone miss, you're probably not going to make this guy miss. He's a very forceful player and very much needs to play big-time football this upcoming weekend. Anthony, I can absolutely do point spread and plus or minus if you guys would absolutely like me to. It's one of those things that I've leaned away from a little bit. I do the best bets at the end of the weekend, or at the end of the week, so kind of pseudo do it. I'm more than happy to pick against the spread as well, but I give out my scores, so pseudo give out my pick on the spread. But the Miami Louisville game will absolutely be covered tomorrow. I can promise you that. No two ways about that. I will get to that one tomorrow, right after we get to that Texas Georgia game. But what do you think of the Big 12 in general? Seems to be having a struggle with that. I totally agree. I think there's a number of different teams that are just one or the other, and you'll have to figure out which team can execute both the best. And frankly, I think you're looking at Iowa State. If you have a team that can do the pass game and the run game and work off each other, that's probably the team you want to play. But at the end of the day, it's going to be really interesting to see this one because it's going to be a lot of passing. No two ways about that. But keys to the game, obviously, how healthy is Travis Hunter is going to play a huge part in this. He is going to be effective. He is never not effective when he is on the football field. How close he is to 100% is going to be interesting because he's going to have to go up against one of the best wide receivers in the entire country. Can he execute at that level that he very much needs to will be interesting to watch. And then the pass rush concepts. Neither of these teams are going to be able to run the ball. They're not necessarily going to do that very aggressively throughout the game. Who can get home more often? Colorado's done a great job with their edge rushers they brought in. I think Arizona has a couple of players that can make some big-time plays in those fronts. Now, the big difference between these two quarterbacks, Noah Fafita can get away a little bit, but no one is better at getting away from sacks than Shedeur Sanders in this world, so that'll be tough to do, but whoever can get him on the ground is going to have a lot of success. And then maybe the biggest one for me is who can find a run game. Neither of these teams have been all that good at finding a run. I think Colorado's averaging 63 yards a game on the ground, so absolutely insane. But the reality is, with all of these plays, with the defense being on the field so often, who can churn clock just a little bit? Who can have that 7-minute drive, put them in for a score, and possibly bury this game? And frankly, when I look at this game, I just think Arizona's going to be able to get it done. I think they have the run game to possibly counter what Colorado can do. I don't necessarily think Travis Hunter is going to be all the way back. He will be effective, no doubt about that. I don't think he's going to make all the plays that he needs to make. I don't know what I believe Arizona has a slight edge defensively when it comes to stats, but although Colorado's playing really, really solidly against the run, so I bet they're very, very close, if I'm being totally honest, Anthony. I don't think there's a lot that separates these teams on that side, and really, it'll come down to what separates them on the offensive side. But I am going to go with Arizona. I think they have just enough answers, and I think they'll be able to get that run game going a little bit better than Colorado will, and I think that's the difference in the game. So going a little bit out on the limb there, but I'll roll with that one for the time being. Kansas State, West Virginia is another huge one because West Virginia just took their first loss in the Big 12 play, and if they want to stay in the fight, they probably got to win this one. Kansas State coming off a huge win that against Colorado on the road, and now you got to go again on the road to a very, very tough environment as well. A very incredible one over there in Morgantown, and can you execute at the level you need to? So, as opposed to the Colorado-Arizona game, this is going to be a ground and pound. I can promise you that. These teams run the ball over 60% of the time. They run for over 190 yards a game. The only difference is here, Kansas State has a 5th rushing defense in the country, West Virginia 58th. So definitely a number to keep in mind there, and it could be the outright decider in this game. And the biggest one for me is Avery Johnson's ability to bounce back in that past game was absolutely huge. It showed a lot of the progression that he's making throughout this year, and hopefully he's going to be able to do it in Morgantown because it's going to be a tough environment to deal with. So in a conference where there's so many weird games, so many upset games, and so many different things that could happen down the stretch, I'm going to say pretty confidently that the loser of this game will not be in Arlington at the end of the year. I think there's too many games right around each other that they're going to stumble at least one more time, and if they stumble in this one, they'll be at 2 losses with probably not another one to spare. So I would definitely lean towards this is kind of a pseudo-elimination game as well, just like Tennessee-Alabama. So moving into players to watch, C.J. Donaldson is a remarkable running back for West Virginia, and he's a forceful guy. He's a guy that you very badly need to be going downhill because Kansas State does a solid job against the run, but if you can bruise him up a little bit, maybe you can break those big time runs that are going to make a huge difference in this game. And then I like Anthony Wilson on the other side. I picked the 212s on this team, but at the end of the day, Anthony Wilson is that pseudo safety linebacker kind of hybrid type player where he steps out into the box a ton, and he's going to need to a ton because the run fits in this game. Being able to make sure that you keep DJ Giddens, you keep Dylan Edwards under wraps is going to be probably the game, end all be all. So you're going to have to make sure that you're ready to roll, and it's going to be really, really tough to get that going. Dante Cephas is someone that we haven't seen a lot from in Kansas State, and frankly, I expected a little bit more. You have Jace Brown, you have Keegan Johnson. You need one of those guys. You need another guy for them to worry about. And frankly, going into this game, I don't know if they're all that worried about number 14, honestly. But I do think he's a very dangerous player, can make a number of big-time plays in this game. But then you got Desmond Purnell. We talked about it. The run fits in this game are going to be absolutely huge. He is the leader of this defense. He's going to have to play a huge game in this one. No two ways about that. And then a couple of questions here from Anthony. That is actually, that's a funny statement. It's one of those games because I know that on other podcasts, I believe Unnecessary Roughness is one of them that does it. They do a game, what has the biggest 2 overtime potential? What's the game that you can get to 2, 3 overtimes? I think Arizona, Colorado, and Kansas State, West Virginia could possibly fall into that category. It's just the Big 12. Honestly, pick whatever Big 12 game you want. That one could get very, very wild. So it's going to be really interesting. I have no earthly idea how this one's going to go, and Arizona, Colorado could be one of those games that we're up they play at 4 p.m., which is a blessing. When you're watching Colorado games at 2 at night, you can't go to sleep because it goes down to the very end. At least we get to get a little bit more sleep in that one, but would be not surprised at all if that thing went to double overtime. I can promise you that, Anthony. But moving on to the keys to the game here, capitalize in the red zone. Both these teams have done such a good job of just kind of lengthening drives, running the ball down the field, making sure that they're putting themselves in front of the sticks and making all the right decisions. They got to turn it. They can't take threes. They got to turn them into 7. They got to be able to finish off those drives. Opponent red scoring percentage for both these teams, West Virginia 94, Kansas State 81. So another little bit of an edge towards Kansas State in this game. And then the run fits from linebackers. We've talked about it every which way from Tuesday, but the reality is Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson for West Virginia, DJ Giddens and Dylan Edwards are 2 of the best duos in the entire country and the entirety of the Big 12. Whichever linebacker core can play better football, can meet them in the gap and not give them yards after contact, is going to have a lot of success in this game. And then who can keep the quarterback cleaner? Because both these quarterbacks are in a weird place where they're not necessarily elite throwers. They've started to play a little bit better football, but that's mainly because the philosophy has changed just a little bit around those two teams. So going to have to be careful in this game. I think Garrett Green, 57% completion, 6 picks on the year. Avery Johnson, 62% completion, 5 picks on the year. Who can take care of the ball is likely going to win this game. And frankly, I just think there's too many signs pointing towards Kansas State. I like this West Virginia team, but I said it last week when they played Iowa State. if they can't run the ball, they're not going to be able to win. Kansas State has one of the best run defenses in the entire country. So I'm going to lean towards Kansas State in this game pretty aggressively. I would bet that might be one of my best bets, but be on the lookout for that one. It's going to be incredible to watch that game unfold, and I just like Kansas State to get it done on the ground. But let's take our third break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the top 10 teams in the country. We'll get into what we need to see from them this upcoming weekend, whether that's an energy type thing or a more schematic change or just seeing a player on the field more often. All of those different things right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just broke down those two big-time Big 12 matchups this upcoming weekend, and there's a ton of them across that conference that we will get to throughout the weekend. But let's get into the top 10 teams in the country. Just get an idea of where they are, how big of the matchups that they're playing are, and just what we need to see from them, both from a mentality perspective in a lot of ways and just on the field. What do you want to see? And we'll start with the number one team in the country. The Texas Longhorns take on the biggest test they've had all year by a pretty comfortable margin, at least offensively, by a very comfortable margin. It's going to be incredible to see what this team is in the SEC. It's the measuring stick game. They want to beat Georgia. You got to beat Georgia to do it. So it's going to be incredible to watch this one. If they win, they are the team to beat in the conference, maybe even the team to beat in the country. If you lose, and you lose convincingly, although I don't necessarily see that in the cards, let's say they lose convincingly, a lot of questions around that program going forward. So a big one in this one. The biggest thing I need to see here is I want to see pre-injury Quinn Ewers. You want to see a Quinn Ewers that is not missing guys over the middle that are open, or not overthrowing guys, not getting off his spot just a little bit too early. And frankly, I think we will. I think he'll be more than fine in this game. I think it was more a little bit of rust, a little bit getting back up to game speed in that Oklahoma game. And frankly, when you're when you're facing a Brent Venables defense, it's going to be really hard to play your best game of football. He does such a good job disguising coverages, and it got to Quinn a couple of times in that game. We'll see if Georgia's able to do the same thing, but biggest thing, get Quinn back where you expect Quinn to be, which is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And then the other one is just keeping your composure. You have not been here. Texas has played really, really good football over the last couple of years. Georgia is coming into your place. You are the favorite in this game. You are the hunted in this game. You got to be able to handle it. It is the difference between a team that wins one title and a team that's be able to sustain it is in these big-time games, you rise to that moment and you're able to handle whatever's thrown at you. You know, a lot of people are going to pick Texas in this game. A lot of people are going to give them that rat poison that they're the best team in the country. How do you handle it? Do you walk out on that field and just take over, or does the UGA's kind of championship DNA take over late in this game? Going to be a huge one, and definitely a lot that Texas needs to check off in this one to get the win. As for Oregon, they're coming off a huge win, one of the best wins in their program's history, and now they're going on the road to Purdue. Shouldn't be a problem, right? I said Saturday there. It is a Friday night game. Apologies for that. That is actually kind of a big piece of this, but the biggest thing here is you're coming off a huge win. You're coming off a very emotional win that, let's be honest, could get you to take your foot off the gas pedal just a little bit. I want to see them go flying out the gates. I would love to see that defense flying all around the field. I would love to see a couple of deep shots early on, and that's the other thing I'd love to see. Dylan Gabriel did a great job pushing the ball downfield against Ohio State. Some of that was a little bit given to him. Not necessarily saying that he didn't make great plays in that game. It's just to say Denzel Burke was playing very close to the line of scrimmage. There were not a lot of safeties over top. Purdue's probably not going to let you do that, at least as consistently. They will probably play a lot of safeties over top, make you earn it, and can he make the plays when that happens? Because that's probably the look he'll get pretty much the rest of the year. Definitely going to be a huge one, and Oregon's just got to be a little bit careful in this one. As for Georgia, on the other side of that Texas matchup, this one's huge. I don't think I need to tell anyone that. There are so many different things that Georgia has to be fixed in this game, that they have to prove that they can do in this game, and right now there's a lot of questions and not too many answers around there. But on the offensive side of the ball, you got to get the run game going. You are not beating this Texas team if you are one-dimensional on offense, because the reality is they have a really good back end. I do think they can be attacked a little bit more aggressively than they have been in the past, especially by a player like Carson Beck, but the reality is pretty much anyone playing one-dimensional football is going to have a really tough time beating an elite team in the sport. That's the reality that Georgia's facing. So they're going to have to play really clean football. They're going to have to be able to run the ball, and then I think openings will come in that back end. No two ways about that. You can't do it if you can't run the ball. That's just the reality of the situation, and one of the reasons that Georgia's struggled a lot early on this season. And then on the other side, the back end of Georgia just has to be more disciplined. There are too many open receivers running, and frankly, you are giving it to the best quarterback that is able to hit open receivers in stride, and you're giving it to a play caller that can just give you nightmares. So they have to be better. They have to be in their hip pocket. A guy that I very much want to see for Georgia this upcoming weekend is Ellis Robinson. He's a freshman. I understand that. Big time game. At the end of the day, you don't have many other better choices. You have to be able to lean on these guys. And Ellis Robinson, the ball skills that he has, ridiculous. So maybe he makes that one play that you need. They got to find something on the back end, or Texas is really going to tear him to pieces. Then we got Miami, and this is an interesting game because the line is not quite what I expected it to be. There's an undefeated team playing really good football, a Heisman candidate, and they're favored by 4 against a Louisville team that has played very inconsistent, very weird football all over the place. So what is this game going to be about? I think for more than anything for Miami, the biggest thing that I want to see is just don't let this team get a lead. It's too easy for a lot of these teams to get leads. Explosive plays have been a big problem, and that's exactly what Louisville likes to do. So you're going to have to be very careful in this game, and there's a world where you get down 21-0 and you just don't have the firepower to come back in this one because the Louisville defense, although not great, is a little bit better than the ones that you faced in the past. And then the other part you want to see, and frankly, it probably would negate the early part of this, no turnovers from Cam Ward. If you can get no turnovers from Cam Ward, you have to feel great about where he's going. If he turns over the ball a couple of times again, you might just have to live with that going forward and just have to win games in spite of those mistakes. But moving on to Alabama, this is a very, very interesting game, and one of those where Alabama's got plenty of things to figure out, and this game is not going to be where they figure out all of them. But the reality is, a lot of stuff has happened. You lose to Vandy, you play a close one against South Carolina at home. A lot of the fan base is questioning a ton of things. You win this one, all of that washes away. You are at a clean slate. You are able to move forward. You are definitely a contender in the CFP and the SEC, so no doubt in my mind, the biggest thing for Alabama in this game, play really competent on the back end. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't, and frankly, if Nico's going to miss the balls that he's been missing, it doesn't need to be perfect by any means. What it does need to be is a whole lot better. There are way too many guys running wide open. Mazio Bennett on that touchdown for South Carolina was as open as I've ever seen someone. It is absolutely ridiculous that they are losing so many guys in coverage, and while Tennessee hasn't necessarily been able to hit those deep shots, you give him 5-10 yards of separation, he's going to be able to hit them. I can promise you that. And then the other thing for me is play complementary football. It feels like all year for Alabama, it's been the offense is absolutely going crazy, but the defense isn't playing all that well. Or the defense is going absolutely crazy, or the offense isn't playing all that well. And the only real time I saw complementary football was the first little bit of that Georgia game. You got to get back to that. You got to be able to play at least a little bit cleaner. You got to get this defense a little bit of time to rest because they've been on the field just way too often this year. So a lot of things that need to happen in this game for Alabama. But at the end of the day, just those execution things on the back end and playing just a little bit more complementary football probably gives you a win here. Then we got LSU, a very interesting game going on the road to Arkansas. I gave my pick here. I do think LSU ekes out a win, but the reality is you're facing a very tough Arkansas team, and no doubt about it, the biggest thing that I need to see is just another good defensive performance. You know, last week I was really astounded with what they were able to do. There were holes, no two ways about that, but the pass rush got home a ton. Weeks was all over the place. They played really, really solid football for the first time on the defensive side of the ball than a calendar year, probably, if I'm being totally honest. So they got a lot of things to figure out, but this is a game where Arkansas can cause some problems for you. But if you can put together another good defensive performance, you now have the confidence that not only you can win a couple of games down the stretch, get to the CFP, but who says you can't get to the SEC title with a defense that's playing a little bit better and an offense that is as explosive as anyone in the country? And then the other thing I need to see is the run game. You just have to get that going more often. Caden Durham has to get going, maybe Josh Williams in there as well. But the reality is you don't get this run game going against a team like A&M, Alabama, it could be a long day for you. And then we got Iowa State, a top 10 team. I absolutely love to see the Cyclones all the way up here. But Iowa State returns home after a big win over West Virginia, and they're returning home to one of the more disappointing teams in the Big 12 thus far this year. So a lot of things for UCF to figure out. But on the other side, for me, I would love to see a really prolific game offensively. I would love to see, pushing the ball downfield a little bit more often. Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel both topping, 75 yards receiving and having a couple of touchdowns, playing incredible football on the outside and just kind of showing that next gear. I think Iowa State still has a little bit of a gear to hit offensively, and this would probably be the game to do it. And then on the other side, you have Ja'Cory Brown starting for UCF. He came in and started that Cincinnati game. It's a very young player. Make him guess a ton of times. Get after him very, very quickly, and frankly, if you do that, this is going to be a blowout win for Iowa State. And then finally, Clemson, a top 10 team, finally a very, very good team that's just kind of handling business. They have another game that they should be able to handle business in against Virginia at home here, and the biggest thing for me here is spread the ball around. You've done a great job of this over the last couple of weeks, so whether it's Burningstool, whether it's Williams, Wesco, TJ Moore, all of those guys on the outside, find a way to facilitate the ball to as many of them as possible, get as many reps as possible, because down the road of the season, you're going to have to play Miami. You're going to have to play possibly Georgia or possibly Texas or whoever else. You're going to have to play a really elite team. You're going to want as many weapons as you possibly can going into that, and all the weapons feeling comfortable going into that. So spread the ball out, get K Klubnik going, get out there with a win, and continue your ride possibly to an ACC title and the CFP. So a lot of things going into this week for the top 10 and a lot of big-time games for the top 10 teams. But let's take our final break here. And when we come back, we just got some questions for you guys. One of the bigger ones that I have is this week could answer a lot of questions, or it could add more questions to our plate. And we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about those top 10 teams. Who are they facing and what do we need to just see from those teams? Whether it's execution-wise, just an energy type thing. There's a lot at stake this upcoming weekend, but let's jump into the questions that I have going into this weekend. And there's a couple, and I want to start with one that is a little bit more convoluted, but are we going to leave this weekend with more answers or more questions? Because there's a lot of games around the country that can give us a lot of answers, that can weed out some teams, and we will get a couple of them. Tennessee, Alabama is going to give us an answer. It will tell us this team is probably in the SEC race, this team is in dire straits going forward. So that at the very least will separate that a little bit. UGA Texas is not quite as clean. If UGA ends up beating Texas, chaos ensues. I have no earthly idea who goes forward in the SEC. You'd have one of these teams towards the top with one loss. You'd have Texas with one loss. You'd have Georgia with one loss. It would be very, very confusing. But at the end of the day, if Texas won, you'd have a little bit more clarity in that SEC conference, and it'll be interesting to see that going forward. And then you got a number of other games. I think Nebraska-Indiana is another one to watch in that Big Ten because that's a pseudo-elimination game in that conference and in the CFP. So definitely one to watch there. But moving forward, then there are games like Arkansas in the SEC. If they get that win, a lot of things go crazy. West Virginia, if they beat Kansas State this upcoming weekend in the Big 12, I have no earthly idea where that goes. Illinois getting a win over Michigan in the Big 10 could catapult them forward into that conversation again. And then Louisville beating Miami would be absolutely crazy and would confuse the ACC. So it's one of those things that it could go either one of those ways. If Kansas State wins, if LSU wins, if Michigan wins, if Miami wins. I was blanking there for a second. If Miami wins that game, we'll have a lot more answers. No two ways about that. The sport in general will start to thin out a little bit. If it goes the other way, then we might just have a little bit of a problem on our hands. And then you got the upsets. You got Auburn if they beat Missouri. I have picked them to beat Missouri. If Mississippi State can somehow get A&M on the road. If Purdue somehow knocks off Oregon, which sounds crazy, but as we know, Friday in West Lafayette is a weird place. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of games that could kind of give us a little bit of clarity this week. But if they go the opposite direction, we could be coming back and having even less of an idea of how this season's going to go going forward. But the other thing I want to talk about, what's the most under-the-radar game of the week? And there's a lot to go to here. You know, huge marquee games, plenty of big-time conference matchups. But then there are these games, some smaller games that you might not be fully tuned into. SMU at Stanford is going to be a huge game. It's a very, very interesting one. Pretty much whenever Stanford gets on the field with a team that they should lose to, they're going to put up a fight. They're a very, very fun team. Ashton Daniels is playing really, really good football. And then on the other side, SMU is starting to look like a CFP is a real possibility for them going forward. So it's one of those things that you got to travel out west. Definitely some variables there for SMU, and maybe it's a little bit closer down the stretch than we're thinking. And then we got Notre Dame, Georgia Tech. This is a very interesting matchup for a number of reasons. And one of the bigger ones is Notre Dame has fallen on some hard times injury-wise, and especially Benjamin Morrison going down. That is a huge deal for this game because so much of what Georgia Tech likes to do is get their wide receivers out on the edge very quickly and let them run. You're losing one of the guys that's one of your more sure tacklers on the outside when you lose Benjamin Morrison. Now, still have Xavier Watts, so he can absolutely fly downfield and make plenty of plays, but it does open up a little bit more of a door for this Georgia Tech offense to get going. And then you got Notre Dame coming in, need this win, need every single win going forward if they want to make the CFP. If they fall in this one, feel very confident that they will not be in that 12-team playoff. And then we got Boston College, West Virginia. This might just be the winner for me. I think this is such an interesting game because neither of these teams are going to play in the ACC. Neither of these teams are going to be a big-time player in the CFP race. What they do have is two quarterbacks that I just love. I think Kyron Jones is so much fun. Thomas Castellanos on the other side is just as fun as well. It's going to be incredible to watch this one, and yeah, I think it's going to get a little wacky as well. So maybe it's one that might not be the cleanest played game in the world, but I promise you'll have some fun watching this one. And then who needs to make a big-time statement? Who is the coach, player, whatever, that needs to be the person that steps up the most? Kalen DeBoer might be the top of the list, if I'm being honest. And now the guy on the other side, Josh Heupel's got plenty on his plate as well this upcoming weekend. But Alabama fans, it feels like they're waiting. It feels like they are sharks in the water just waiting for that chum to be thrown. And this would be the game where if he loses it, plenty of chum is going to be thrown in the water, and they will come. So the reality is you got to be very careful. He's got to coach a really, really good football game here. He cannot be the reason that they lose this game, whether it's play calling offensively or decisions down the stretch, or Alabama fans are going to have a fit. That's the reality of the situation. We saw it after the Vanderbilt game. It would be very aggressive after this one as well. He's got to be able to execute, and it's a huge, huge game for him just perception-wise in Alabama going forward. And then we got to talk about Kirby Smart. This is a huge one in Austin, and frankly, there's a team that has not played very good football thus far. They have been all over the place. They haven't looked like a Kirby Smart football team. All of that changes on Saturday if they can execute. If they can go in and win that game, maybe by 10 points at Texas, none of that other stuff matters. You feel like you have the Georgia that we expected to see, and they're rolling downhill. So this is a huge one for them. Obviously for Texas, got to make a statement that you can not only belong in the SEC, but be the team to beat in the SEC. And then there's plenty of others. Nebraska, Indiana is going to be a really, really huge game, and definitely one where someone's got to make a big statement in that one. KSU, Kansas State can absolutely plant their flag this weekend. Colorado could bounce back in a huge way and get back into the fight, and so many more games that you just need that one big moment, whether it's a coach, whether it's a player, whether it's just a team in general. You need that one big moment, and it could totally change your season. And then we move on to the Group of 5 game of the week. This is something that I absolutely love to do because we'll give all the love in the world to the Power 4. I think everyone understands that. That's where the sport starts. But there's so many fun games a little bit below us, so many talented players a little bit below what we're watching on Saturday. So Western Kentucky Sam Houston is one I want to start with, and it is tonight, so definitely tune in for that one. But an incredible matchup between these two teams that are really rolling right now. I think the quarterback matchup between Caden Veltkamp and Hunter Watson is going to be really, really fun to watch. Two guys that are very different. Hunter Watson, a little bit more of a dual threat guy. Caden Veltkamp likes to stand in there and make those throws. So it's going to be a fun matchup. I would lean Western Kentucky, but I don't know. Don't feel very confident. Sam Houston's playing really, really good football right about now. Toledo, Northern Illinois is going to be a huge one as well in this one. These are the number 2 and 3 teams in odds to win the MAC right now, and this would go a long way to getting there, no doubt about that. Ohio's right above them, so we'll see if they match up with them later in the season, and maybe they can really plant their flag. But this is a huge one. Puts you in perspective, puts you in a very, very good position to possibly make the MAC title, and then you win that one, you feel pretty confident. I don't think any of the teams from this conference are making the CFP, but plenty of really fun football is being played over there in the MAC. My winner is North Texas Memphis, and this one's a little bit different than I think a lot of people would look at, but Memphis has found their way back into the CFP race. It's going to have to take them running the table and looking very efficient and a little bit of help here and there for them to get back in, but reality is you got one loss in the American, you absolutely are in the fight, and then you got a dangerous North Texas team coming into town. They scored 44, 52, and 41 in their last 3 games. They could cause problems for Memphis, and maybe there's a little bit of a shootout on Saturday. So a ton of really fun games in the G5, but I think this one, with all of the craziness, with all of the offense I expect to be seen, it's going to be well worth your watch. Then moving on to the Heisman race. Who can make up the most ground in the Heisman race this week? And frankly, it starts with Jalen Milroe. There's no two ways about that. He fell off quite a bit this past weekend, not playing great football against South Carolina. I don't think he's fully out of the race, but he's going to have to play pretty much lights out the rest of the way, and getting a big one in Tennessee would be absolutely massive. Frankly, that's the reason I picked Alabama in that game, was because I think he's going to have a big game. I think he's going to rise to this moment. I think he's going to play really good football, and maybe he's right back in the center of that conversation this time next week. I mean, we saw what happened with Dillon Gabriel. He got one big-time game on the national stage, and he's right. He might be number 1 in odds right now. I hope he's not, but he might be number 1 in odds right now. And then we got to talk about Travis Hunter. He can make up tons of ground just by virtue of Ashton Jeanty is not playing this week. Very much a little bit of an opening. Jeanty took full advantage. Took full advantage of when Hunter was out with I believe 186-yard performance in a half. So let's see if Travis Hunter can follow suit there. It's going to be very tough coming back from that injury, but this would be a game where if he can put on a show, then he might just be the number 1 guy, and he could very well not let go of that position. The biggest one by a mile to me is Quinn Ewers, if I'm being totally honest. Now, that game last week could have kind of taken him out of contention. You know, you miss 2 games, you then come back for a game and don't look fully crisp. Maybe that was enough, but the reality is, we saw it with Dillon Gabriel, we saw it with a number of quarterbacks. You beat Georgia at night, and you look really, really good doing it. Say he puts on a 2022 Oklahoma performance. I don't expect that to happen, but let's just say he does that. This is going to be top 3, top 5 in the odds on Monday. I can pretty much promise you that. This is a player that was probably leading it when he got injured and then went down for a couple of weeks. But if he comes back swinging this upcoming weekend, I feel like it's going to be hard for odds makers to not bump him up pretty high in that Heisman race. And then finally, the individual matchup of the week. This is something that I've really, really gotten to like on this segment because it's one of those things. You don't have to look at the big time. You don't have to look at the teams. You don't have to look at the coaches necessarily. Or you can look at the coaches, which we will here in a second. But you can look at the individual matchups, whether it's position on position, coach on coach, player on player. And we'll start with one, player on player. T-Mac against Travis Hunter is going to be special. It's 2 of the very best players in the entire country, probably the top wide receiver off the board this upcoming draft cycle in T-Mac. Maybe Luther Burden beats him out, but we'll see what happens there. And then the top cornerback off the board, although he's probably going to be the top 4 wide receiver off the board as well. So very, very confusing world, but at the end of the day, whenever you get to see what I would consider the second best wide receiver in the country face off what I would consider the 5th best wide receiver in the country. Whenever you get to see those 2 guys go against each other, weird, but very much like it. It's going to be incredible to watch that matchup, and whoever wins it could very easily win that game. The other thing I want to talk about, Kalen DeBoer against Tim Banks, is going to be fascinating in that Tennessee game because you know Kalen DeBoer can do this. You know he can scheme up stuff incredibly well, probably better than just about anyone in the country. Tim Banks is no different on the other side. He's absolutely incredible, does an incredible job simulating blitzes. He does have a little bit of a susceptible back end, but that's not necessarily his fault. That's more personnel-wise. So it's going to be incredible to see this chess match go underway, and whoever wins it, very well will win this game. I can promise you that. And then we got Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart. They're going to have their hands full, and it's because the guy on the other side, Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian, obviously, are a nightmare to deal with. When you have a third-year quarterback that runs an offense that is already hard to get a beat on, even when it's not a third-year quarterback, when you have a guy that's so crisp, that's so on time pretty much every single play, the defense just has to be perfect. And even when it's perfect, sometimes you're going to get beat. You have to be able to tackle really effectively in this game. You have to be able to disguise coverages the same way Oklahoma did. A lot of things need to be done in this game to possibly stop this Texas offense, because it has not been something that anyone has been able to do this year. And Georgia, while I do think, I would venture to say this is the best defense they've played. I think Oklahoma might have them beat by just a hair, but at the end of the day, they're going to have their hands full, and they have to be able to execute at that ridiculously high level from a play calling perspective, or Quinn Ewers is going to eat him for dinner, be at the top of the Heisman odds, and Texas might just be running away with this conference. So a lot of things going into this week that we're going to have to be on the lookout for. Obviously, we will get to that Georgia-Texas game. We will get to a lot of the big-time ACC games, a couple of big-time, I'm missing one, Big Ten games this upcoming weekend. Tomorrow, we will cover all of those games, starting with that big-time one in Austin. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have great people doing great work across every single sport you could want. So anything in the world of sports, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow for that Georgia-Texas breakdown.